Japan has always had an interesting relationship with isolation. I mean that in both a macro sense and in a micro sense. In a macro sense, when the Tokugawa clan emerged victorious from the Civil War period in the early 17th century, they decided to implement a closed borders policy with the rest of the world. For over 200 years, nearly all trade between Japan and the world came to an immediate halt. Foreigners were barred from entering, and Japanese citizens were forbidden from leaving. Christian missionaries in particular were swiftly executed by the shogunate. All of this was done to stop any foreign influences from further disrupting or causing any more political instability to a deeply fractured and vulnerable nation. This policy, known as sakoku, which literally translates to isolation, is one of the reasons that Japan is the way it is today. It's one of the reasons why the cultural roots of Japan are so intact. It's one of the reasons why the history and legacy of the way life was thousands of years ago is so well preserved today. But it came at a cost. There was economic collapse, multiple famines, and Japan fell far behind the rest of the world in technological, industrial, and military development as a result of isolating itself for over 200 years. And then there's isolation in the micro sense. You travel around this country and you'll see it for yourself. On trains, in restaurants, in bars, people here suffer from chronic loneliness. There are entire bars themed to provide people companionship. There are restaurants and ramen shops where you sit down and you're enclosed between two barriers where you eat your ramen and you eat your food in privacy. It's the reason why there's a mental health crisis in Japan. It's the reason why Japan has one of the highest rates of suicide in the developed world. Isolation. It has a cost, both in a micro sense and in a macro sense. And that's what brings us here to Hokkaido, the northernmost island of Japan, and perhaps the most isolated. Hokkaido accounts for about 20% of Japan's landmass, but only about 5% of its population. We are in the sleepy ski resort town of Niseko, and standing behind me is the beautiful, omnipresent Mount Yotei, the second largest mountain in Japan, behind Mount Fuji, obviously. Standing at about 6,300 feet or so, Mount Yotei is the symbol of Hokkaido. And she's a beauty, isn't she? Where were we? Ah, yes, the double-edged sword that is isolation. The same isolation that preserves and protects is the same isolation that can cause stagnation. The culture of Japanese isolation lived far beyond the end of sakoku. As I've said before, this is a country and a culture that prioritizes self-reliance. In 1995, only about 1% of the Japanese population was foreign-born. But after decades of deindustrialization and a falling birth rate, we can observe the cost of that as well. In 1995, Japan accounted for 15% of the world's GDP. It was the second largest economy in the world. Fast forward now to 2025, Japan only now accounts for about 4.5% of global GDP, and it is now not in the top 3 largest economies in the world. It will soon fall out of the top 5 largest economies in the world. Japan has a rapidly aging population that is failing to meet the needs of its economic demands, and with that, the Japanese government, in order to offset those issues, is looking to bring in a larger foreign-born population of workers. The decision to increase Japan's foreign-born workforce population is very controversial, not just in Japan, but it's taken on a heated debate globally. Just a few weeks after this was filmed, Sanae Takaichi was announced as Japan's next prime minister. She will be the country's first female head of state, and her hardline stance on immigration and economic protectionism was massively appealing to voters. Who's right? Who's wrong? I don't really know. I see both sides to it, if I'm being honest. On one hand, I myself am a product of globalization. I'm a child of Indian immigrants in America, and on the other hand, I completely understand the desire and value of preserving culture and heritage. I think we need to ask ourselves, What does it really mean to celebrate multiculturalism in the modern world? In 1995, only about 15% of Japan's population was over the age of 65. Today, that number is closer to about 35%. Elderly people are on benefits. Elderly people need welfare. And without a young workforce, you are never going to be able to take care of the elderly. I came to Japan to escape many of these conversations, many of these problems. And ultimately, you realize that there is no escaping from escapism itself. Japan is not a utopia. The same problems that exist in America, the same problems that exist in Europe, in China, in Africa, all you have to do is look beyond the surface level and you will find that those same problems exist here. There is no running away from it. This is the double-edged sword that I'm talking about. One of the byproducts of Japan's economy declining as a result of its aging population and of its policy of closed borders and protectionism for so long is that now the yen has dropped to such a remarkably low amount that the amount of foreign tourists has exploded in the last couple years. So much so that Japan is now putting restrictions on tourism starting from 2026. We keep coming back to these problems. There's no way to avoid it. There has to be some sort of balance that's struck in order to resolve issues on multiple fronts simultaneously. So often people and politicians take these extreme measures and then have to offset it by taking some other extreme measure down the line. In this time of globalization, we more than ever come into contact with people who may not come from where we come from, who may not think the way we think, who may not look the way we look. And it's more important than ever to ensure that everybody we meet and come in contact with, that we do treat them with respect and compassion. Compassion is not only a virtue of our time, compassion is an essential virtue of the warrior. Compassion is our next virtue of Bushido. Make no mistake about it, in this world of ours that's changing at a faster rate than ever before, tribalism is definitely on the rise. Once upon a time, there was the agricultural revolution, then the industrial revolution, and now we are living through the information revolution. Human beings were never meant to have access to so much information at such convenience. Every day we are bombarded with images and scenes that desensitize us and bewilder us. Our brains have not evolved to the point of being able to process everything everywhere all at once. In these confusing, strange times, perhaps it's only natural to retreat to and find comfort in the tribes that we identify ourselves with. For some, it's religion. For others, it's ethnicity, maybe sexuality, nationality. For some confused souls, they relegate their entire identity to the exact shade of their skin tone. Look, identity is complicated. Nobody is just one thing. Identity is never singular or unitary. No matter how you want to divide up the world in various tribes, the reality is that even amongst those tribes, you will not find 100% uniformity or solidarity. This basic truth underscores the necessity for Jin, the Bushido value of compassion and empathy. Within the canon of Japanese storytelling, perhaps nobody embodies the ethos of Jin more profoundly than Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli. Now, there are many stories from Studio Ghibli that we can talk about, but the one in particular that I'd like to highlight is the film that helped launch and cement Studio Ghibli within Japan and eventually all across the world. I'm talking about the story of Nausicaa. It's 1,000 years after a terrible global war has pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. We did it to ourselves. We became so obsessed with building bigger and deadlier instruments of destruction that there was nowhere left to hide. Earth has turned into a post-apocalyptic, toxic wasteland filled with monstrous, giant insects and poisonous spores. What remains of humanity spends most of its remaining time and resources living in fear of the insects and preparing to kill them off as well. But while the masses live in fear of what they don't understand, there is a fearless and curious spirit amongst them. Princess Nausicaa of the peaceful Valley of the Wind. She rides alone into the jungle. Her purpose is simple. She simply seeks to learn about the insects and their ecosystem. Curiosity and empathy go hand in hand. If empathy is your ability to step into another's shoes and see from their point of view, then curiosity is simply your desire or willingness to do so. Nausicaa's curiosity leads her to making a groundbreaking discovery. The giant insects aren't a result of the toxic and radioactive world. They are just disturbed by it. They are an ancient species forced to adapt to a world that was destroyed by humans. In fact, the insects have the ability to purify the pollution. Nausicaa carries a rifle with her that she's been trained to use since childhood. Such is the reality of the dystopic world she lives in, filled with grotesque giant bugs and savage human raiders. This is the profound irony that underscores the entire ethos of the story. On one hand, Miyazaki is emphatically critical of mankind's desire to wield weapons. Nausicaa is repeatedly shown using her rifle with absolute tactical precision, time and time again, but at no point during the entire film does the princess take another life on screen. Instead, the princess uses her gun in all sorts of other ways to disarm threats, signal warnings to the insects, and promote peace. It's only by using this instrument of killing and subverting its intended purpose that she's able to demonstrate that all life is sacred. She risks her own life repeatedly for the insects and uses empathy instead of force to bring about change. Nausicaa is a reminder to us that the true strength of a warrior is rooted in their kindness. Nausicaa was released in 1984, but Hayao Miyazaki had been producing serialized manga publications of the story for years prior to any plans of a studio film. His work caught the eye of a magazine editor, Toshio Suzuki, who befriended Miyazaki and began lobbying to the magazine's owners to finance an animated version of Nausicaa. The next step was to find a team of animators to bring Miyazaki's story and sketches to life. They subcontracted the project to a small but respected animation studio called Topcraft. Shortly after, Miyazaki brought another man on board, Joe Hisaishi, to compose the film's music. Hisaishi's signature synth-heavy orchestral sound would go on to become a beloved hallmark of Studio Ghibli's catalog. This core group had no intention of fame or wealth. They just believed in the story and wanted to see it come to life. Nausicaa was an immediate commercial and critical success, and it forced the group into a reality check. As subcontractors, they had no ownership of their work, and so, in the following year of 1985, Miyazaki, Suzuki, Hisaishi, and a team of 30 elite animators broke off on their own and founded Studio Ghibli. The rest was history. People talk about assimilation a lot, and the reality is, it's a lot easier to assimilate when community and a sense of belonging exists somewhere. How can we expect people to assimilate into a community and culture if they're seen as nothing but unwelcome from the start? Increasingly, that sense of belonging is something that people go online for now. When community is no longer defined by the physical boundaries of where someone lives, of course it's going to be harder to assimilate. Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli are keenly aware of these things, of course. This is why compassion and the emphasis for human connection are such foundational reoccurring themes across all of the studio's stories. In recent years and months, Miyazaki himself has come out to disavow the use of computer-generated AI art utilizing the Ghibli style of animation. The Ghibli art style is
something that is quite sacred. It's animators design and draw and depict these characters and these stories with handmade drawings. There is an element of human connection even there. The reason that these stories and these characters feel so real and feel so alive and feel so genuine is because they're made by real people. They're made in a painstakingly difficult and long process. And when you simply type in some garbage into an AI generator, you're removing that sense of human connection from the art itself. Our time in Hokkaido, I'm afraid, has come to an end. I'm going to be flying back out to Tokyo in a few hours. Our time in Japan has almost come to an end.